12, 13-year-old girl is going to a California school, and she comes home to you some night and says, guess who was in the shower with us? Bobby from down the street. You'll know why. You'll know why. In Colorado, there is a school that has made that a policy in the school that you can shower, you can use your restroom, whatever gender you happen to identify with today. And there's a guy in this one particular school district that kind of goes back and forth. One day he's a boy, the next day he's a girl, and whatever he wants to be. And so he's been in the girls' locker rooms, and he's been harassing some of the girls. This is another one Brad Dacus is involved in. They contacted him. He contacted the school. The school said, you can't do this. The girls have a right to privacy. And the school's response was, no, the boy's right to act out his gender identity trumps their right to privacy. State of California again. Up here in the land of fruit and nuts. Don't know whether that's their agricultural product or their political product, but they have passed a law out there that requires that youth groups now have to have gay mentors. I'll let you think about that a little bit. Send your kid off to a youth camp, and there are gay mentors there, or lesbian mentors, depending on the case. About 2 years ago, when we were going through the throes of throwing out 3 Supreme Court justices, remember after the Harlan case, there was a pastor in Sioux City, something called the World Outreach Church of Sioux City or something like that. His name is Pastor Terry Gordon, had him on the program. Nice guy. When he was involved in this, he's an evangelical minister, they get involved in all these things. After the 3 judges were denied retention by the voters, funny things started happening at his church. A car mysteriously caught fire in the church grounds. Garbage was dumped in the driveway. We started getting all sorts of goofy phone calls, nasty letters. And this is the tolerant left. And he started getting Facebook messages. You bigot. You ought to go to hell. Well, he responded as an evangelical minister would. Oh, I don't want anybody to go to hell. I don't want you to go to hell either. Let's talk about this. You know, here's the passage from Romans, here's the passage from wherever. And you ought to start learning about your own soul. Guy wrote back. He said, I don't need the likes of you to teach me about Christianity. Not only should you go to hell, your whole family ought to go to hell. And the sooner, the better. Well, because it was on Facebook, they could figure out who did this. 2 months ago, the gentleman who authored that was appointed to the Sioux City Human Rights Commission. We have attacks on conscience and on religious rights. One of the things that started me getting interested in this area of the law were the pharmacists that were being asked to provide abortion pills, the day after the Plan B pill, or contraceptives, or something that they were uncomfortable in distributing. And we would see cases come up where pharmacists were being fired, they were losing their job, they were being reprimanded because they didn't want to hand out morning after pills. And so some states, Illinois was one of them, passed a rule that said you must do this. And other places have passed rules that say not only must you do this, you've got to stock these drugs. You know, because some pharmacies won't stock certain drugs, especially things like Oxycontin that are going to be, you know, burglars are going to come in and want to take them. So some drugs they don't sell. They have no choice. These drugs have to be stocked. Well, those cases have been across the board, across the country. We've won some, we've lost some. The last victory that we had on those was in the state of Illinois, where a pharmacist was being sued over that, and they went up to the court and they won. Very rare victory for us. Chaplains. Have you seen what's going on in the military? Chaplains are being told how to pray, what they can pray. Being told what they can say and what they can't say. We had General Jerry Boykin on the program, retired Lieutenant General. For those of you not familiar with military rank, Lieutenant General is 3 stars. Okay? Former combat commander of both Delta Force and the Green Berets. He's now the Executive Vice President of the Family Research Council. Had him on this is the one program that we had where we only had one guest. We used him for the whole show instead of having 2. So he's getting calls from chaplains around the world about how they're being restricted, what they can say and what they can't say. And if you remember, when the HHS mandate was first announced, all the bishops sent out letters to their clergy. You know, we're opposing this. Here's the letter from the bishop to read from the pulpit. The Archbishop of the military diocese did the same thing. And the Department of Defense says to the Catholic chaplains, you can't read it. You can't read the letter that your bishop is sending to you to read to your people. We have the case down in Lakeland Air Force Base, where the senior master sergeant there was working for a lesbian commander. And an issue came up with one of the people who had, one of the airmen, had, apparently had said something that she found offensive. And the senior, this guy is 19 years in service. The sergeant is talking with the major, and she's asking, what kind of punishment should we do? And he's saying, I don't think we need to punish the guy. Let's just use this as a teaching. This is an episode that maybe we can get some harmony and teaching. And she asked him, are you in favor of same-sex marriage or not? Apparently that was the issue about the company. And he said, well, he said, I'd really rather not talk about it. And she pushed him. Come on, tell me. How do you feel on same-sex marriage? He said, I'm afraid, Major, if I told you, you would disagree. The next day, she relieved him of his duties. The Air Force claimed that he was relieved because his tour had ended. That's not true. Air Force lied. I talked to their attorney. I talked to this man's pastor. It was a Baptist church outside the Air Force base. He was scheduled to rotate about 6 weeks later. She fired him. Not only did she fire him, but all of a sudden he was being investigated now by the Air Force. And what was so disturbing about the investigation, they weren't coming out and just telling him that we'd like to know what was said, we'd like to know what happened. They were coming out, and the first thing out of their mouth for him was his Miranda rights. That meant it was a criminal investigation. Pastor down there tells me, I'm having field grade officers come in to talk to me about they are so nervous about being Christian down there because there seems to be a witch hunt on at Lakeland. We're having, by the way, not next week, but the week after, Colonel Ron Cruz, who's a retired Army chaplain. He's going to be on the program. He is chairman now of something called the Chaplains Alliance for Religious Freedom. Just talked to him yesterday on the phone. He said this is happening all over. Matter of fact, there is a program now from the DOD where they are training military people to look for domestic subversives. And you know who the domestic subversives are? Evangelical Christians traditional Catholics, and of course Al-Qaeda and Hamas. They're getting this information from something called the Southern Poverty Law Center. Southern Poverty Law Center was once a respected civil rights organization. It has gone completely overboard. And if you remember, a year or so ago, there was a man that shot up the Family Research Council office in Washington, D.C. because he thought they were a hate group. You know where he got the information from? Southern Poverty Law Center. It's on their webpage. Tea Party, by the way, is also a domestic terrorist. This is what is being taught to our military folks. Now, I just saw something before I came over here, something that came across the wire. Apparently, the military has now discontinued some of those programs pending an investigation. Don't know what's going to come of it, but that's where we're at right now. We have, around the country, we see colleges that are limiting the speech rights of pro-life and pro-traditional family student organizations. We'll have a transgender group or the Gay and Lesbian Alliance or whatever get student funds. They can have rooms where they can meet in, and they can use the university bulletin board webpage to pass out their information and to put up information about their meetings. When a pro-life group comes, they're basically told that if you want to pass out your literature, there's an 8-by-8-foot area in the student commons, usually in the basement, away from things, that you can use, and you have to provide us with all your materials at least 10 days ahead of time. That's what happened at DMAC, if you remember. Something like that, very similar to that happened at DMAC. DMAC, by the way, ended up paying that student almost $14,000 covered legal fees, the student one. But these speech codes, these speech regulations on campus against people who are traditional Christians and who are ascribing to traditional Christian values like we do, being marginal. And of course, we all know about the HHS mandate. The HHS mandate says that it doesn't matter whether you agree or not, or whether you have any opposition, any philosophical or religious opposition to it, you are going to hand out, free of charge, contraception and abortion pills, and provide sterilization services, all of which are against the church. The exception to that is for the church itself, and people that work right in the church, and for church organizations that only hire Catholics and only serve Catholics. Okay? Mother Teresa couldn't go that. That's what the HHS did. And in San Antonio, there was an ordinance that was proposed. It passed, but in a watered-down form, that basically said that if you have ever belonged to an organization that has taken a position against full homosexual rights, that you are disqualified from serving on any board or commission in the city. You cannot get a job with the city, and you can't even get a contract with the city. That passed, but in a watered-down form. And then finally, real quick, on abortion. One of the things that we see now is that, and we've seen this in the past, but there seems to be more of it now. Nurses that are being forced to participate in abortion. Had a case out of New York where the woman was working for a hospital, and she had the agreement with them. She was a surgery nurse, but she wasn't going to do abortions. They had agreed. One day they came in, they said, "We need you, you got an abortion." She said, "No, I'm not going to do it." They threatened her. You'll be fired. Not only will you be fired, but we are going to turn you into the nursing board as abandoning a patient. You'll lose your license. She was forced to comply. Almost had a nervous breakdown. Sued the hospital. Court said she's going to have a case. And then finally, we now have the over-the-counter morning after pill that is now available to anyone without a prescription of any age. Pretty soon they're going to have these things probably in vending machines in junior high cafeterias. So all these things are combining now, and a lot of these things, I'm sure if I take a poll, a lot of these things you've probably never heard of before. But they're going on and they're out there, and what I'm talking about tonight is only the very tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of it going on out there, and our religious liberties and our rights are at stake, and we're watching them erode slowly and slowly, much like the frog in the pan of water that's being heated. Eventually, as they turn up little by little the heat, they're going to cook the frog. So what we need to do is we need to be a voice of reason, a voice to our faith. Besides prayer, one of the things that we need to do is we need to become knowledgeable about what's going on. Because obviously CBS News isn't going to give you, neither is the Morning Register give you all this. So we got to be willing to confront it. And when we see the column in the newspaper that's attacking us, we got to, like Tom did, got to be ready to respond to that and be prepared to take the heat, because it will come. If you ever have seen one of those articles, go to the website of the paper and read the comments that come in. So you will see there's a lot of hatred out there. But anyway, that's just some of the things that are going on. We're 9 and 9 on Tuesdays. I invite you to join in. If you have questions or comments about the program, I'm at deaconmike@q.com. Feel free to contact me. I think they asked me if I'd take some questions. Do we have time for okay, time for a couple questions? Go ahead. We didn't want to hear you anyway.
Okay, I'll speak. Please explain to me how there's some cases where, like the crazy guy in Cleveland that had those women boarded up for 10 years, impregnated one, forced the abortion on her. When he was brought to justice, they charged him with murder of the unborn child.
So how can the law view that as murder, but when it comes to the case of an abortion, it's a woman's choice?
What was it? Shakespeare once said, the law's an ass. That's how it happened. What happens, you have different jurisdictions that come up with different responses to the same question. And,
But we wait federal, so that covers the entire United States.
he was tried in a state court.
So that, okay. So
He was tried in a state court. Right. And there are some places now that have laws protecting fetuses from somebody who would like to terminate the life of the fetus without the consent of the mother. And that's kind of the trick on those things. And that's the loophole, that's the difference they see. In an abortion, the mother is voluntarily doing this. Whereas in some of these other cases, somebody is doing it to her against her will. And legally, go ahead, yes.
Two questions. One is, how do you think the ACLJ is doing?
Okay. Center for Law and Justice, right? Jay Sekulow.
And second one, two companies that are still fighting the Mexican fight for these types of cases.
Yeah. All right. Let me take the first one first. He asked about how he asked about how the ACLJ was doing tonight. Mike's not working out. I'll repeat it for everybody there. He asked how the ACLJ is doing. They seem to be doing a pretty decent job. All these people, you know, it used to be years ago, the ACLU would go into court and there'd be nobody to oppose them. Now there are numerous places, Alliance Spending Freedom, ACLJ, Beckett Fund, and so they're meeting their match now. And so we do grudgingly win a couple of them. Okay? The second case had to do about, the second question had to do about the cases of people, businesses fighting the Obamacare mandate. There are two cases that may be headed to the Supreme Court right now. One is one that we're probably all familiar with, Hobby Lobby case. Hobby Lobby won at the Court of Appeals level. There's a manufacturing firm in Michigan that lost at the Court of Appeals level. So you've got two different courts of appeals with two different opinions. That's something the Supreme Court is going to have to decide. So they're probably both going to be, go to the Supreme Court, probably consolidate the cases and handle them both at the same time. Yeah. Oh, Chick-fil-A? Yeah. And I don't know where their litigation is. There's about 38, 40 lawsuits that were filed. Somebody had a question in the back?
I do have a question. It's more of an observation.
Okay.
In regard to the state of Iowa, after a decision, the Supreme Court affirmed unanimously that same-sex marriage boils down to a situation where I'm driven to church every Sunday by a judge, a marvelous judge, and gave me 60 pages of opinion, CYA verbal labor, what do you call it, labelist, lawyer language, that says, after you finish reading it, that there's a line in it that says, every citizen in Iowa is able to receive, that paraphrase, equal opportunity. That's the two words that are killing the people.
Yeah.
Equal opportunity gave the courts the ability to follow the law. Now, what do we do to change the, you have to change it by an amendment.
Well, yes, and of course, if you remember, there was an amendment introduced in the legislature that wasn't allowed to be voted on in the state senate. So we'll never get a chance to vote on it until you change the composition of the Senate, state senate. If you read the Varnum decision, and it's about a 60-page decision.
Terrible.
And if you read it, if you are a lay person and you're reading it, you can read through and say, okay, I agree with this, I agree with this, I agree with it. And it takes you right down the primrose path. But if you read it with a little bit of legal knowledge, it's a horrible decision because a lot of the conclusions are just not sound, non-sequitur. They don't follow one another as you would expect them to do. But for the layman, it sounded good. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, from my observation, I think that we're winning the abortion battle because we have the youth. On the homosexual agenda, I think my concern is that we're losing the youth. What's your observation?
I think that's very correct, and I've made that observation before. Abortion, we seem to be winning. Science is on our side on abortion. Everybody on the pro-choice side said, oh, this is a doctor's decision decided by science, not by religion. Well, guess what? Science supports religion on this thing. Science can tell you when a baby comes to life, when it's human, and they're doing it. And, a lot of young people are looking around in their classrooms and thinking, my dad's classroom had 25 more people, And so they realize what's happening. And you're right, we are winning on that level. Problem is same-sex marriage, and that's why I think it is the greatest threat to us right now. And it is that zero-sum game, at least with abortion. Up until the HHS mandate, the arguments usually were around bubble things, bubble zones around the abortion center that you couldn't cross and things like that. But it wasn't, nobody was forcing you to do something. Occasional nurse you'd have that would sue and usually win at that point. But that was it. The same-sex marriage thing, you can see where that's just mushrooming out of control. I think Matt Staver is absolutely correct. It's a zero-sum game for them. They think they're winning, therefore we must lose.
A couple of days ago, I found a website called Culture of Life Africa. Now, Africa has become a very Catholic, Christian continent. Now, the United Nations, the United Kingdom, and the United States are supposedly going to save that continent economically. But part of the deal is that they're trying to force on these governments down there recognition of the lesbian, gay, queer, transsexual crowd.
And abortion.
And, well, but what this is doing, it's skyrocketing back up again, elevating the AIDS. That's highlighted on this website. Also, they're forcing there's an open letter on this website to President Obama about that. Another open letter to Mrs. Gates, who's pledged $4.6 billion.
The good Catholic, Mrs. Gates.
Yeah, and they're going to save these people with condoms. And the condoms are only about 90% effective. With the 30 million people with the AIDS there, it's just going to kill people.
What you're talking about with the government policies and all that, go back to Paul VI reading Monte Vitae. That's what he predicted would happen. And read that. That's happening today.
And they're citing that in this on this website over and over and over again.
Chinese are eating our lunch.
Go ahead.
No.
Our Constitution establishes three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. It also has checks and balances between the legislative and executive. What is the check and balance of the judicial?
Well, apparently there's less and less as we go. The check on the judiciary is Congress and the president. Basically, the way it works, if you get any two branches of government ganging up in the third one, the two will win. But the courts have been, in some instances, a little bit unreasonable about things. And the legislature, I mean, look at the makeup of the House and Senate. I mean, they don't talk to one another anymore, much less, reason with us. So, we just figure we got a dysfunctional government right now. So, if we have a dysfunctional government, a dysfunctional Congress, a dysfunctional executive, don't expect any check in the courts. Worry that one of our good conservatives on the court might get hit by a bus or something. One coronary on the Supreme Court, and it will change forever. So pray for the health. Yeah.
So on a spiritual note, you're talking about worry just now, and so much bad news, quite frankly. As a deacon, what do you recommend to fend off sometimes the despair that I think some of us could feel when, constantly in every part of the media and right here tonight, we're hearing some bad news. There's surely some glimpses of light.
Yeah, there is.
But spiritually speaking, what can we do to fend off the despair?
Well, I'll tell you the one thing that most men would do when they were having problems, especially the little boys, they go to their mother. And I think one thing that we can do this October, the month of Mary, is go to our mother, get the rosary beads out, and make your novenas. She is listening. She is listening. Whether hearts are too hard to be changed or not, I don't know. But she is listening, and she's on our side. And she will protect us. She will help us. But we also have to do things other than just pray. And like I said, we have to respond. And unfortunately, we haven't always been good about that. Cardinal Dolan says the one nice thing about the HHS mandate is now Catholics know what the teaching on contraception is. Because, we never talked about it very much, And you don't hear about these things much in the pulpit. I gave a homily at St. Augustine a couple of months ago. It was just as they were starting the Fortnight for Freedom. And I was talking about these things, and I took stuff right off the USCCB webpage, talked about it. I had 3 people get up and walk out.